This is the kind of shit I like. A heart in the middle of the armor. It makes no sense, but it looks cute. It looks good. It's Japanese. It's futuristic. It's retro. It's a box and it's plastic, and I love it. Hello guys, this is a video about me trying to figure out how to build my first MASCHINEN KRIEGER kit, which is a model kit brand from Japan that started in the 80s, but now it's coming back with a punch. But enough about me! Let's get to build this baby. As you can see, there's boxes and then there's bags, and inside those bags we have plastic. Lots of cute and intricate and beautifully detailed plastic. And in order to do so, we have pictures of the thing that we're supposed to build alongside with ideas on how to put color in it, how to paint it. Now, first we have to lay out all the small pieces, right? Trying to make sense of what goes where to start, which at first it's a little bit, challenging because it doesn't make a lot of sense. But little by little, and that's part of the fun, you figure out, hey, this part belongs here and this other part belongs there, and this is a head and this is another head, and I'm starting to get my head around it. Yes. Now we also have this beautifully detailed instruction manual with most of the instructions in Japanese, but it doesn't really matter because you can just look at the pictures. And we're gonna start with the beginning, from the bottom to the top, which means we start with the feet, which are kind of funny looking. This whole MASCHINEN KRIEGER franchise, it's interesting because the designs have a unique quality. You know, they're inspired, of course, on sci-fi from the 80s. So Star Wars, perhaps Star Trek, perhaps another 80s sci-fi franchise that I can think of right now, but you get the point. Now, I don't know much about the franchise, but I want to share with you a handful of facts, a handful of fun facts about the franchise and what happened to it and where did it start and where is it now. So, generally speaking, the things that I was able to dug up online was that MASCHINEN KRIEGER, it's the new and funky sounding name of the formerly called SF.3.D, which it's a little bit of wordplay in Japanese, also pronounced S.F.3.D, because apparently san is pronounced 3 in Japanese, so san-di, so yeah, something like that. I guess it makes sense. But regardless of the pronunciation, I think it just speaks about the ethos, kind of the vibe of what the brand is about. Something lowbrow, something chill, you do on your Sunday, in your free time, and just have some fun with it. It's the alternative to the more popular model kit brands, sci-fi model kit brands like Gundam, Gunpla, with the sleek angles and the more, polished image and sort of, high-tech feeling of that franchise. This is the alternative. This is something that's rough around the edges, that it's more quirky looking, also less known, more obscure, but also with a peculiar charm, I guess. That's why I like it. And you can see that reflected also on the paint, the paintwork of even the box art of most of the kits. It's not too clean. It's a little messy, a little weathered, heavily weathered sometimes. That also has to do with the universe in which this franchise takes place, which, even though it's not fully developed, or it's not like super developed. It's there. It borrows also, I think, a bit from Mad Max. You know, that kind of post-apocalyptic, you know, a sort of abandoned, humanity left to its own devices, trying to rebuild itself from the ashes of a former culture or international or interplanetary civilization, something along those lines. And I like also that it's not so profound or so precise, because it allows you to fill in the blanks, to have your own interpretation, to have fun with it. I think this is one of the advantages, the blessings in disguise, so to speak, of having a franchise with a loose narrative. You know, that you can put a little bit of yourself in it and make it yourself, make it yours. So yeah, that's a little bit of an overall view. I don't know if that made any sense or if it just left you more confused than before. But if you're more interested about finding out about Maschinen Krieger, Google it. And no, but also I'll try to share a few of the channels that speak about the franchise. There's not a few. It's a very niche franchise, but I guess that's also why I'm making this video, so more people know about it, because I think it deserves more attention. The designs are beautiful, the kits are very high quality, and yeah, I think it's a hidden gem of the model kit building world. Because I don't know, maybe I don't know enough, but I haven't seen a lot of alternatives, and I haven't seen a lot of variety when it comes to model kit making. You know, you have this kind of old school traditional World War II tanks, planes, ships, and vehicles and whatnot, and then you have the gunpla, right, with all its wonderful variety. But I think there are like huge gaps in between that range that you know, small niche brands like Maschinen Krieger are thankfully filling up. And yeah, I think thankfully it's coming back, and it's been redistributed. And even though there are some old school kits that are hard to find, but there are also you know, somewhat buried options of model kits out there today that you can one way or another get your hands on. I'm not gonna tell you how, because I only know of a few that not necessarily will work for you, but yeah, what I'm trying to say is that they are available. But yeah, depending on where you live, of course, they may be more or less available, but you get my point. Now I'm gonna try to speak a little bit about the building process. I had to do a few things with it that I've never particularly done before. One of them, for instance, was adding all the little rivets, which was surprisingly not as challenging as I thought it was gonna be, but it was also not that easy. It was like, you know, if you've ever put how do you call it, like thread through a needle, it was a little bit like that, you know, like trying to get into that tiny, you know, point in the armor where you needed to place the rivet in order for it to look precise. That's my cat, by the way, a menace. I think most cats find small plastic bits somewhat amusing, which is funny unless you are working with those small plastic bits. But hey, here you can see the legs are mostly done, and also I'm just finishing up all the unscrewing. And before I went for the priming, I decided to add this little product called Mr. Surfacer, which adds this beautiful rough texture to the whole model and allow me to create a little bit of contrast, a little bit of variety, and all the softness of the plastic, which I was a little bit hesitant at first, because I like the softness of the plastic, like that polished metal. But at the end, I was happy. I think it made the design pop. It gave it a unique look, and it was pretty fun to work with. It's acetone based, so it's a little smelly, even though the smell kind of grows on you, but it's not too healthy. So don't take my word for it. But yeah, once it dries, it just feels super natural. And with the primer, as you can see here, it gets a little lost, but the idea is also to use the color contrast to bring back the different materials, or the sense that it's built with different materials, with different kinds of metal, and iron, copper, industrial materials. Here I'm using Pinterest. It's the good old reference site, trying to figure out the color palette, trying to make it give it a personality at first. And even though throughout the process I don't stick as closely to the palette as sometimes perhaps I should, but it does gives you an overall sense of the sort of the feeling that you're going for. Yeah, the base coat was a little bit too thick, and it ended up clogging the airbrush in no time. But hey, I think like in many things in life, the name of the game is trial and error. A lot of times you get analysis paralysis. You're trying to figure out what you're gonna do before you do it, and sometimes it's just better to go ahead and do it. Even if you mess things up, you end up learning, and you end up having a feeling for what you're doing more than a conclusion or a particular set of instructions. And at least that's how I've approached most of my projects in this sense. I just go ahead, and then for the next project I have that experience, and I can again improvise, but I have a little bit more of common sense of what to do and what not to do, even though there's always room to mess stuff up from the very beginning and do the same mistake twice or thrice, but you do end up learning from your mistakes and making better mistakes. Because I haven't been working with models for a long time, so I'm amazed at the amount of techniques and tricks that you can apply and combine, and things to learn really. Even though you can always find the technique that works for you and just stick with it, and kind of marry the technique, which is also great. But there's also, like, if you're interested, if you're curious, there's also new things that you can learn and new things that you can try, and different products, and it's virtually turns into a craft. Not to be highbrow, but it's just that there are some truly amazing model makers out there, some unsung heroes. Here I'm trying to be a little fancy with the masking. It did work. It wasn't wasn't super hermetic. It wasn't super perfectly sealed, but it worked. Even though next time I might get a different kind of masking tape, something a little more soft to work around the edges. But here we have the base colors down, and even the interiors are looking a little bit more polished. I really like that they added a lot of details, like the pipe work, that it's not supposed to be seen, as well as the part of an engine, or I think it's a gas tank, not the blue one, but there's also one in the back, and I really enjoy those details. It gives me a feeling that the designer thought about the assembly process and about the model makers, adding those details that the final piece might not show, but that the person that built them knows they are there. So it's a little bit of a wink, sense of complicity between the designer and the model maker, which I think it's great. I am adding red and black Vallejo inks to create this dark reddish ink, and then I am applying it all over the red parts of the body of the model, trying to get rid of the base red color or red tone that was more plasticky, in going for this darkish look that it's more coherent with the grime and with the weather look that I'm going for. I did add some weathering before the ink. As you can see, there are some kind of pink, orangey, peachy patches, but without the inks they don't look as cohesive, and once you bring in the inks they just kind of blend into one shape. Here I'm also adding a little bit of ink as well, just black ink to the metal parts, but I ended up more by accident than by design with somewhat of I would describe a burned weather look. That's the feeling it gave me. Like it's made of materials that are heat resistant, but regardless of its resistance, they do get weathered, right? Like if you've seen metal that has been on a furnace or in a smithing workshop, they do have like a roughness to them that they don't look untouched by the heat, but they do look like they've been through stresses, right? For the leather, it was not that complicated actually to be able to get decent leather textures. It's just mostly about layering and going from darker tones to more clear tones with the brownish inks, the skin wash, the brown wash. And yeah, I think they complement each other, because one is not enough. It's about the second, the third layers that really start bringing out those textures, right? That kind of like softness of the leather, but also a little bit of shine. Another very characteristic instance of the Maschinen Krieger kits is the heavy use of decals, and I think the designs also have somewhat of a humor to them, that they don't take themselves too seriously, and I think that's lovely. Here I'm also using a stellar product of the video, and the process was this softer, decal softener that really was super fun to use, because the decals on themselves, they're a bit challenging to work with, I ain't gonna lie. Not super challenging. I mean, it's part of it, but just getting them in the exact position and trying to make them match in both sides to be somewhat symmetrical, it's a little bit tricky. You just have to go back and forth and use your fingertip, but just the tip of the tip, and then you move it too much, and then you have to bring it back. And then with the softener, once you have it in position, it's a little bit wrinkly and it's a little bit protruding. And then so you come in with the softener, you wait some 5 minutes, and then you come back to it, and wow, it looks somewhat soft. And you can just kind of like spread it out, and it just starts to get the shape of the surface, and just I think if I'm gonna recommend the product in this video, it's gonna be that one alongside with plastic cement. I'm not sponsored or affiliated to any of those products. I'm just saying they do work and they were pretty useful. Here I'm adding the decals on the I think they're like smoke bombs that are attached to the head of the suit. It's funny because when I was in the assembly process, the suit gave me reminded me of an octopus, but once I added this smoke bomb cans to the head, it just switched and looked like a moose or some sort of deer. Also, another fun fact of this model series is that the name ammonite also makes the reference to ammonite. I don't know if that makes sense, but I guess it's just the gimmick that they do have a reference on sea creatures. Here, as you can see, perhaps the most iconic decal of them all, that little skull with the shell on its head looking like a horn. Really, I think it's the one that defines the series the most. And here I'm adding a little bit of contrast to the rivets, trying to bring them back a little bit, not being too careful about staying within the limits of the rivets themselves, just allowing the paint to add to that effect of the bleed of the rust, perhaps. Talking about the weathering, I think the tricky part is to keep a balance in the sense that, and I am certainly guilty of this, it's easy to feel tempted to just add weathering in all directions, all over the place, because it looks good or you feel like it looks cool, which it does. And I mean, if you are not worried about it, then you don't have to. This is just again, goes down to aesthetic decision. But if you want to be a little bit more subtle with it, I think it's important to be mindful of the shapes and where it would make sense for the rust or the dust or the bullet impacts to accumulate. And I think, it creates a contrast that it's more appealing and more realistic. Working in this scale also allowed me to go back and do actual shipping in the decals, which was super fun, and I rarely had the chance to try it out. And just going with the fine sandpaper and just doing those actual scratches, it was super fun. And I think every time that you get the chance to mimic the weathering effects as as physically accurately as possible, it's fun. And yeah, it's just kind of bridges the gap between paint and more of a craft technique. For the next step, here I confess, maybe I was going a bit too far. I thought of adding all the verdigris, kind of coppery rust, even though perhaps it wasn't so, physically or material wise, it didn't make that much sense. But I just wanted to, bring back some color, and I tried to, work it through the layers. And yeah, at first it was looking perhaps too green, something like from the deep sea, something that was soaked in salty water for years. And then I tried to bring it back with more, with lighter tones. And I think it ended up looking decent. It wasn't, too subtle, but it worked just fine. I think once again, the model kit ethos, it's forgiving when it comes to the MASCHINEN KRIEGER kits. And here I'm working on the screen. The kind of bright fluorescent green and fluorescent tones in general are usually a little bit tricky. You have to add some base layers that complement the color in order for the fluorescence of the tone to not be lost. And here I'm adding some last decals and kind of a little bit of a tricky location, but it ended up just nice. Here are the last touches in the weapon. I never really figured out if it's a flamethrower or it's a laser, but I'm not gonna question a sci-fi universe from the 80s. Now I'm just gonna go for the last step, which is the infamous and beautiful and only does it all striking Grime from AK Interactive. Another wonder product that adds that dusty, grimy patina layer to the whole thing, and also I think it kind of brings it together. Sometimes some tones or some finishes may have a different saturation, and this kind of puts it all together. Makes it look cohesive, and also it's beautiful, and it's nice to work with. I like applying it loosely, and focus on some areas, even though when you kind of come back to clean it, you end up kind of working it around pretty much most of the model. So again, this is once it's dry, you come back in with a Q-tip or with a brush soaked in white spirits, that good old technique, and rework it, and that's when most of the magic really comes together, as one is able to redirect and focus the grime in the parts of the model that would make more sense. For instance, given more of a rainy, the way the water moves through structures in long streaks, and those sort of details really add up. Not one in particular, but when you take into account a few of those throughout the model. They just come together in a way. And last but not least, I worked my way around the palette. I don't have a lot of experience painting these models at this scale 120, so I had to figure a few things out. And yeah, in my defense, I think the palette is not supposed to be the centerpiece of the kit, which is certainly the armor and the battle suit. It's more of a atmospheric addition. He brings a sense of realism and a sense of scale to the armor suit, and I think I went for complementary palette to the one of the armor. Try to use the same base tones, even though in the details I diverted a little bit, but I was happily surprised with the way the highlights worked in the pens, thanks to the airbrush. Sometimes if you go a little bit too much on an angle, some of those clothes effects get lost. So I was happy with the degree of contrast that was naturally placed in the pilot. And then I added the straps, so it lost its fireman look. And then for the second pilot, which there is a second pilot, if you haven't noticed, which goes inside the suit, and he's a little bit of a gimmick because he's actually just a torso. But for him, I added the eyes, just foreshadowing the eyes, because I think the eyes are too subtle to really do anything other than just sort of hint at them. And here I went for the inks once again, a little bit of dry brushing, and we're almost there, guys. Now I'm gonna shut the hell up for a couple minutes and let you enjoy a little bit of the video in sacred silence. Here I have to mention that the streaking grime ate away some of the highlights from the pants that I was so proud of, but on the other hand, it also makes sense for the palette to be somewhat messed up as much as the rest of the armor. Thank you for allowing me to share with you this project. If you're just passing through or you were here for each step of the process, you really give a different meaning and a bigger depth to all of these projects that otherwise would be lost in the ether of the internet. And now I leave you with a small reel of the finished model. In this part of the video, I just want to remind you that if you want to stay in contact, if you want to tell YouTube that they can remind you the next time there's more content in the channel, please click the appropriate buttons you already know. That said, I just want to thank you once again for finding some value in the video. If you did, if you found it entertaining, if you find it curious, amusing, don't be afraid to be vocal about it. And if you didn't, also be vocal about it. Why not? This is Tabletoperos. Sigue jugando.